Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we getting on? Welcome to a brand new Starfield video. So yesterday, Bethesda dropped some information, a new Into the Starfield video about the music of Starfield, and there's some really cool stuff to chatter about in here. And for those who have heard a little bit before, I'm sure you'll be very hyped for the music that's coming with this game because it's really, really cool, and the stuff we've heard sounds absolutely fantastic. And it's really interesting to hear Inon Zur and Mark Lampert talking about it, who are two of the key audio guys on the game. So let's jump into this one. Okay, so this is going to be a bit of an odd one because I don't want to play too much of the music. I'll link as much as possible down below, so I'll link to this video that we're covering. I will link back to the Skyrim 10th Anniversary concert. Also had the full Starfield main theme suite thing being played by the orchestra in there, so you can check those out again and sort of refresh yourself in the context of the information here. But there's some cool kind of nerdy stuff about this music and stuff that's going to be really good to talk about, and I'm looking forward to that. So the music is something that has been talked about on previous occasions a little bit. Todd Howard talked about it in a previous interview, but as far back as November, I think. And obviously we had the Skyrim 10th Anniversary concert and stuff that obviously had some of the Starfield music in as well to close that out, which is really, really cool. Some of the stuff in here is stuff we kind of knew already. Some of it's expanding on that. Some of it's some cool little takes and insights into what's going on. So I'm really interested in this stuff. It's definitely kind of a nerdy fun about the music of Starfield. And Bethesda's games in general, actually. So first up, Inon Zur shared a really interesting observation about how he's approached the tone and the sound of this soundtrack, this score, in that rather than just being environment, stuff like that, or character-based, a lot of it is informed by the sort of motivations of the character. So we know the player character is going to be a member of Constellation, this organization of space explorers, the last organization of space explorers. And there's probably going to be quite a wandering vibe of us being sort of on the fringes of society a bit. It's speculation, that's the feeling I'm getting. And that sort of loneliness and being one person wandering through and exploring space and seeing what we discover, that sort of thing, seeing what's out there is definitely a big thing, is what's informing the tone and sound of the game, which is really, really cool. So it's environment stuff obviously comes in, but the fact that the basis for the journey is such a significant part of it should really make music blend well with our experience and what we're doing and why we're doing it, which is a really cool mindset for Inon Zur to pick up. For those who don't know Inon Zur, by the way, he's a very well-known composer of video game music. He's actually done TV and movies in the past and still occasionally touches TV. My hunch is he may end up scoring the Fallout TV series when that comes out, but we'll see. But yeah, he's got a really, really long back catalogue of some really amazing music. The thing that I discovered him through was Dragon Age Origins specifically. The music in that game is mind-blowing. And literally made me stop and go, I've got to find out who this person is, and get on there and Google it and so on and so forth, and that's how I came across the guy. So I'll link his IMDb page down below, because I bet if you scroll through that, pretty much everybody will find at least a couple of games that he's worked on that you've played and thought, damn, the music in this game is great. And there's definitely a good bunch in there that I've seen, and it's really, really cool. The guy's done some absolutely amazing work over the years and is amazingly prolific as well, which is hugely impressive to me as well, that he's able to produce such high-quality music so often. He's absolutely brilliant. And he's worked on Bethesda games previously as well, particularly Fallout 4 and Fallout 76, so the music in those games is pretty damn cool. It blends in really, really well to the wider game. So very, very cool to have him back for this one, and from what we've heard so far, very, very cool nonetheless. So, in terms of when Bethesda actually make the music, something Todd Howard talked about back in November, and something they've talked about here is it's one of the first things Bethesda do when they're designing any game. They'll start with concept art, stuff like that, basic premises for the overall game, and then the music will come in really, really early alongside the concept art as well. So, Inon Zur in this video talked about coming in during Fallout 4's really early development back in 2012, and walking into the artist room and seeing the concept art being created and stuff that had already been done and stuff like that. Same sort of thing will have happened here for Starfield. Obviously, we've got the premise of the journey as well as the environments and the concept art, stuff like that. But it's one of the reasons that Bethesda's music works so well with the gameplay and the environments and everything else is because it's there from day one. They create it right at the start of that development process. I'm sure that given the scale of development and the amount of things that change during a multi-year development cycle, that Inon Zur will have to come back in later on and create new pieces of music for new environments and stuff like that as development continues on. But the initial early stuff, at the very least, will the main themes, stuff like that, get created so early on that everything that comes afterwards in terms of gameplay, environments, character, creature design, all of that stuff, everything basically, is already being informed by the existing music that's laid down as a kind of foundation stone. Obviously, things move around a little bit, but it's really cool, and it's one of the reasons that Bethesda's tone and vibe in their games is so distinct. And yeah, I think that's really, really cool to know about, and an interesting little tidbit. And hearing Inon Zur's take on how that works and how he approaches that sort of thing was really, really cool in this video as well. As I say, link down below, so I do suggest heading over to Bethesda's YouTube page and checking out this little video. It's very cool. So one of the big things they were talking about being sort of a major feature of the score, which is not really surprising, is that iconic main theme. Bethesda usually do that, be it Fallout games, or Skyrim's a really good example of that one. The Dragonborn theme is hugely iconic. Different composer, but principle still applies. And obviously it's going to apply here. We've heard that iconic Starfield main theme countless times now, and we're going to hear it countless more times, I'm sure. Especially once the game comes out, obviously. That starting theme is really a strong starting point, and a very big thing that informs the rest of the music. So both Inon Zur and Mark were talking about the importance of that and how the rest of the sound design and the music kind of flows from that core point, which is really cool and keeps that vibe going on, and how everything links together, which is really interesting. And if you look back at certain other games, as I said, obviously Skyrim, Fallout 76, for those who play a decent amount of that, has got a couple of themes in there that are really stand out, that you could hear anywhere, and you go, that's Fallout 76. Obviously Skyrim does the same thing. Fallout 4, weirdly, I find less so, although that may be a unique thing to the way I had to approach the game, so that's a bit of an odd one, but the music there sits back really nicely and just adds to the tone of the whole game, so in that regards, if it's kind of not noticeable, it's doing what it's supposed to do, which is something else they kind of talked about in this. Sometimes the music that you don't notice is the most effective stuff, because it's just conveying mood and feeling, which is really cool. Obviously, it's kind of like video editing in that stage, or be that for TV, movies, or YouTube. The best edits are the stuff you don't notice. And the same thing applies to the music as well. If it's the right piece, written the right way, it's got the right tone, and it fits behind the environment, the experience you're currently having, it'll enhance the tone without you really being consciously aware of it. And that makes it particularly effective, which is very, very cool, and definitely something they're going for here, and I'm sure they will pull off, because they've certainly pulled it off in the past. So one of the cool things Inon Zur's talked about here is kind of the way he structures the music, or has done for Starfield, and it's kind of a triplet cycling thing going on, so 3 main sections that, you've got a core one that then develops and then kind of loops back a bit to where it started. And that kind of looping thing works really well for any kind of music. Actually, it's quite common in classical music in general. It's surprisingly more common than you think in metal, and particularly progressive heavy metal. And it's something I used to do back when I was writing many, many moons ago. And you see it in a lot of, particularly the more progressive end of metal as well, but also classical music, that's kind of developing themes and looping concepts in the music. And it works really well for video games in particularly things like Bethesda's games and Starfield, because there's a lot of freedom and player agency. You can go where you want, when you want, and do what you want. Having the music adapt to that has got to be a more complex thing, I think, because if you're going somewhere at a specific time and the developers have a certain amount of control over that with a more linear game style, then it's much easier to say this piece of music needs to go here, that one there, and so on. But when the player kind of can suddenly go, I'm going that way, then suddenly that's much harder to do. So having those kind of looping refrains and concepts inside the music means that wherever you go, you're still tied into that core music and the core vibe of the game, and it can evolve more naturally with whatever you're doing, in a way that works with the unpredictability of players being able to go and do whatever they want, whenever they want. So that's quite a cool little concept as well in terms of the structure of the music. And it also kind of simplifies it in some way, so it'll sit back behind your experience a bit more naturally, and as I said before, that kind of tone and mood that you don't notice. A simple loop of music will certainly sit back in that way and kind of sit in your subconscious more than being overly prominent, which is a really useful way of doing it. So that's quite cool as well. So there was an interesting conversation in there about the way the orchestral arrangement was done as well. They only touched on it really kind of briefly, It talked about creating kind of a bed of sound with the strings, and then having the woodwind instruments picking out things like faster particles in space and stuff like that kind of vibe. And then with the horns over the top and the brass creating that big kind of rise that really grabs you and pulls you in. Which is quite a fairly traditional way of structuring orchestral music. It's not massively unusual, but it works really well, and it's going to be really good at conveying the vibe of space here, which is going to be very interesting. One of the interesting things that comes out of that as well is something that Mark Lampert was talking about, is how he uses the score to create parts of the environmental sound. There's an ambient kind of tone that you get to a lot of places. I mean, really easy example is like, I suspect at some point, I'd be very surprised if this doesn't happen, we'll end up in a creepy abandoned space station. You know, we're exploring space, it's somewhat inhabited. I'd be surprised if there isn't a creepy abandoned space station somewhere. Pure speculation, of course, but obviously creepy, scary places like that often have a low hum and tone to them, particularly in sci-fi type horror. Not that this is a horror game, but that sort of spooky vibe will come from a low hum and vibration through the music. And one of the ways Mark was talking about doing that is by taking sections of the score, for example the woodwind stuff, and changing the tone of it, slowing it down, obviously dropping the volume back so it sits back into the ambient sound, and doing stuff like that, which is interesting to me because that's going to create an interesting connection between the score and the environmental sound, so the two will work really well together. And you kind of won't pick up on the fact that the two are so linked, but they will naturally flow together. And I think that's a really, really cool idea in a kind of nerdy, fascinating kind of a way, but I'm really, really interested to see that actually in action in Starfield. And I should say, Mark Lampert has been with Bethesda since, I think he said it was 2005 in this video, so back in the Oblivion days, and he's worked on the sound design for a lot of Bethesda's games, so this is not going to be a new concept to Bethesda games at all. Something I'm sure he has done in the past, but sort of knowing about it is an interesting thing, and it's going to change my perception of the environmental sounds as well as the score, which is really, really interesting. I'm looking forward to sort of finding out more about that and experiencing more of that. So one of the other things they touch on that I found really interesting is the concept of vastness of space and using music to convey that. And that's a really interesting thing to me because obviously distances in space are insanely huge, beyond what we can really comprehend, because the numbers are so darn huge, and also they're so far outside of the overwhelming majority of human beings' experience. You know, none of us have really experienced spaceflight bar a few rare individuals, and even those haven't gone that far. The few handful of people who've gone to the moon have even not gone that far. So we're going way outside of our experience and sheer volume of space and distances. So conveying that has got to be challenging, especially given that you're conveying it on a screen. So the soundscapes and the tone and the music is obviously a big part of doing that, and the way they're designing it to do that is really, really interesting and cool. And I think it's going to go a long way to creating that feeling of being alone in a huge volume of empty space, which is going to be really, really interesting. And it's going to apply on the planetary side as well, although in a slightly different way, as they implied with this video. Obviously, when you're exploring an unexplored planet and you're alone and you're off in the middle of nowhere, that's going to have its own kind of spatial vibe as well that the music will inform. And sort of them talking about that and how those things are going to go together is quite an interesting idea, and makes me very interested to get into the sound and experience this. And I'll be experiencing most of Starfield through headphones, I've no doubt, and I suspect even more than Bethesda's other games, this would be a particularly good way of doing it for this type of game. So yeah, if you've got the option, I want to think about that one, it'd be cool. So a couple of other last points here that I want to touch on. One of the cool things we're talking about with that main theme, again to loop back to that, is how it's going to come in at key moments. So obviously Bethesda's games are well known for having big moments. You know, things like level ups, which are one thing they talked about, where the main theme comes back. If you look at Fallout as an easy example, Skyrim too, but particularly with Fallout, that main theme kind of comes up in a big crescendo when you hit a level to say, hey, you have leveled up, and make a big vibe out of that, big feeling and a moment out of it. And they basically said the same thing's going to be going on in Starfield as well, which is not surprising, but that kind of really iconic main refrain from the title music that we've heard so far is going to go really, really well with those moments. I suspect one of the other examples of that is going to be the step-out moments that Todd Howard was fond of talking about, you know, the Starfield equivalent to stepping out of the vault, or emerging from the cave at the start of Skyrim. You know, there's going to be... Todd Howard's implied there's going to be a couple of those moments, actually. But there's obviously going to be one in particular that is huge, and I suspect we'll be hearing that main refrain coming in as the world opens up and we get that first look at our ability to go out and explore. And probably in the second time as well, but I suspect that's going to be very, very cool as well, and the music will come out there. And as it always does, and it really creates that kind of specific to the game moment of epicness that I think is going to be really, really cool to get to grips with, and I'm really excited for. So there's another sort of speculative thing here that's kind of a throwaway comment that I'm curious about. Inon Zur mentioned creating a traditional orchestral sound palette, which I suspect is going to go for most of the game. But the fact he singled it out makes me wonder whether or not they're also going to use something that is less traditional. It could just be that this is an early decision that they made that they're going to use this kind of a sound palette for the whole game. Possible. Probable even. But it's also possible that some environments, some situations, that sort of thing in the game might be contrasting quite dramatically with the rest of the game. There may be some really unique, weird environments, places, scenarios that we find ourselves in. Who knows? But they might be... This might be an implication that they'll go another direction with the sound, go less traditional, less orchestral, and have that contrast in there, which I'm sure will be very, very cool if they are doing that at some point. And I'm sure Inon Zur will do a fantastic job of that as well as everything else he's doing, because he pretty much always does, to be fair to the man. So the potential there for something that really contrasts could be quite interesting. I'd be interested to see if we come up with something like that that really stands out. Obviously, the two are going to link together, even if they do that, so maybe the transition and the contrast won't be quite so in your face, but hopefully I mean, it would be cool if they do something along those lines, you know, some kind of contrasting sound, something that is really outside of the rest of the experience. Because, I mean, I think this game is going to do stuff that we can't possibly predict and expect. Bethesda will do that because they're taking something in such a different direction to the stuff they've done before, so I think it's possible it'll be something really out there in the game, and they may take a very different direction for the sound design and the music for that scenario. So, potentially very interesting. We'll have to wait and see until November when the game comes out, which a few people, myself included, have got this kind of "I can't come soon enough" vibe, but there's also an element of take your time, don't rush it. So yeah, really, really excited. One last thing I wanted to pick on that we can't really infer too much from, but there's a little shot in the footage here of the orchestra that shows the header of some of the sheet music. It talks about the main theme to Indra, whatever that may be, and we've not heard of this Indra place before as far as I'm aware, or person. It could be a place, it could be a person, it could be a unique ship that we might have some kind of involvement in. I'm guessing whatever it is, it's going to be a significant point in the story, because they picked this specific thing to show. It may be a coincidence, but I'm going to lean towards place rather than person, but I'm sure characters will have, or some characters at least, will have their own main themes, particularly big key characters for the story, so it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, we've got a name for something that we didn't really have before, Indra, whatever that may be. Something significant if it's got its own main theme, so definitely interested to find out more about that. So, that's basically everything I want to pull out this one. They also included in this video, as Bethesda have been doing for a while, a whole bunch of new concept art. There's not massive amounts of it, but I think that will need to go in a separate video, because there's, I think it's about 7 pieces of interesting concept art. So I'll do that one for tomorrow, so do keep your eyes out for that one, you know, notification bell and subs and all that good stuff so you don't miss it. The concept art for this game has been absolutely phenomenal, and has gone at least some way to informing the sound design as well, I am sure. So very much looking forward to some of this new stuff. The new concept art's got some really, really epic looking stuff, and I'm really looking forward to getting into that. So yeah, some of this stuff's amazing. Bethesda, you can't praise them highly enough for their concept art, really, I don't think. I'd basically wallpaper my house with it if I could. It's that good. I absolutely love it. So looking forward to diving into that one tomorrow, so do watch out for that one. But for now, I do hope you enjoyed this little chatter about the music of Starfield. I'm certainly fascinated to get into the sound design and all that stuff. It's something that's interested me for years, so I'm very much looking forward to getting into that. Very excited for it. So thank you very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed. If you did enjoy the video, please consider dropping subs, likes, etc, etc. I do very much appreciate it. Down below the video, you'll find social media links, merch store, and channel memberships if you're interested in supporting the channel in that way as well. I really, really appreciate that. It massively helps out. So huge thank you to everyone who's done that already. And if you get a chance, do join us for live streams as well. We're, of course, playing Fallout 76 for the moment. We'll be playing Starfield when the time comes. But if you're waiting for Starfield and want a little something in the meantime, we're also playing Mass Effect 3 at the moment, which is good fun, and give you a little hit of that space vibe if you're into that, so do hope you'll join us for that. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you all very, very soon.